my friend.
You too, Carlos.
So welcome to the Museum of Graffiti. And Niels, while I was waiting for you, I've read your resume to everyone.
Okay, good.
And so I want to just jump right in
Sure.
to the discussion. And again, welcome. It is a pleasure to have you joining us again and participating with the museum again. We opened up the museum with your exhibition and the mural the beautiful mural you made for us. But let's go back in your story to the beginning, because when I saw this image, I was really quite surprised. I was like, well, there's a shoe.
Yeah.
So tell me, what's the origins of shoe and graffiti writing?
Well, I mean, it all started with the actual shoe. Well, it was a really bad drawing of a shoe. And back in, when I did my first shoe tag was maybe, I think, probably 79. Around that time, here in Amsterdam, there was quite a vibrant graffiti scene. Like pretty much like half of all the kids that I knew in high school, they had a graffiti name. And I had this drawing of a shoe that I made, but as you can see from the picture over there, that's actually not me walking the dog, but I was a little bit smaller back then. But anyway, the picture was so bad that I had to write shoe next to it because people didn't see what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So after a while, the drawing, disappeared, and I kept the name.
But then you started discovering graffiti style lettering, and we can see on these paintings on the lower half of the slide, where the top slide you see your shoe tag, you draw the shoe and you write shoe, but now the lower half, these two images have a letter form. They have a actually classic New York old school graffiti style.
Sure, yeah, it was a big, I mean, when I started doing graffiti, I had no idea about New York and trains being painted and all that. But gradually, in the early 80s, we started to notice that, we got photos and movies and stuff coming out, and we realized that, we could do it in a much bigger and more, expressive way. And so that made a big change. And a lot of old writers that, that didn't make that transition, but some of us did. And we took it from there. And, that's the start of graffiti, New York graffiti, going all over the world and kind of taking over.
Who were your peers? Who were the younger writers that started out with you?
Oh, Delta. Well, I used to write Lone back then. A lot of names you wouldn't know, but there was one, especially one guy that influenced me a lot, especially also with the calligraphy, the Gothic kind of lettering, who was, his name was Dr. Rat, Ivar Fix, and he already was very famous or infamous around 1979, 1980, and he actually overdosed in 81, but he was already so famous by then. And I was trying out kind of Gothic lettering to make it a little bit bigger. I think there's a picture of that somewhere in your files, but
here I'll go to that image.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, exactly. This was definitely inspired by him, and this is before I had any idea of pieces being done in New York, which is kind of funny if you look back now that in '82 I already did this. And I would come back to mixing graffiti and calligraphy 35 years later or something like that.
Yeah, it's an amazing history. I'm going to go back.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to these early pieces. because then you start your style writing starts to take shape. Obviously, New York influence is coming to Europe. I see that you have CIA tagged in your piece, so I
Right. Yeah.
imagine by this time you met Dondi White in Europe. How did you
Yeah.
meet the American writers?
Yeah, that's a quite an interesting thing that happened. Around, in my neighborhood, there was where I grew up. There was a gallery called Jackie Kornblit, and he was one of the first art dealers who would show graffiti artists from New York in Europe. And well, that's how I got to meet Dondi, Futura, Quick, and they all became kind of, some of them more than others, but real friends, and they influenced me, and especially Dondi. I think he had solo show once or maybe three times, two times, three times, I can't remember, but that was, yeah, I showed him Amsterdam, the coffee shops, and we hung out, and we drew a lot also, went back to his hotel room and start drawing, and for me that was just like, something completely outer worldly, that you could do also letters in that way. And especially also Quick, he bombed the whole neighborhood around the gallery, and I couldn't believe, that you could do graffiti that big, and on moving, on transportation, and stuff like that. And so that made a big shift in the whole graffiti scene in Amsterdam.
So at that point, were you just stationed in Amsterdam, or you were also traveling to other countries to write?
Not the thing was that Dondi did, like I said, Dondi influenced me a lot because, and he was visionary also. And like I think Futura said that once, like Dondi was handing out styles, like to the kids, he would give them a drawing and their lives would be changed forever. And the same goes for me actually. And he also had the vision of graffiti being much bigger, and the whole crew culture of building a network of writers, of artists. And he said, yeah, you can be. He made me CIA overseas president. I mean, I was just like a 16-year-old kid. And but I guess he recognized something, that we could do something and make it bigger than just New York. And I went to New York, I think. Yeah, also my mom played a big role in this, because she actually she took my sister and me to go on a kind of a low budget trip to the States. We spent a week in New York, staying on a couch with a friend, and we took the Greyhound bus and all that shit. But the week in New York was really interesting, because I wanted to see Dondi, who I'd met, in Amsterdam, but I didn't have his phone number. So but I knew he was living in Brooklyn, so I took the phone book and started calling all the whites in Brooklyn, which were quite a lot. But I got hold of him and we met. And that was just another moment, where I knew graffiti was going to play a big role in my life.
Another thing that is important is that you also met Ramelzi.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and
Ramelzi, yeah.
and how important was that in your experience as a writer?
Well, it was very significant in a way that, I mean, of course I mean, I was so lucky to see all these very special artists who were all different. And also I met Keith Haring, who I at the time thought, wasn't really graffiti, so I wasn't really interested. But Ramelzi, he had this, yeah, different approach to the whole. I mean, he was definitely such a big part of the whole culture, but his approach was so different and so, yeah, so special, so much of him, you know. I mean, this. So every time I went to New York, like years and years after, I always went to go see him in the battle station, and that was, you know, near Canal Street, where he lived and worked, and that's always been, you know, very yeah, interesting get-togethers.
That's a very good foundation of writers to be associated with.
Yeah.
But later on, you would go on to create Crime Time Kings with Bando and Mo too.
Yeah, that, I
And
mean, that came actually quite soon after my whole New York experience. Then I started traveling in Europe, and there wasn't really any graffiti scenes in Europe, and not connected anyway. So I went to Paris, you know, on an interrail, like a train ticket you could get as a youth ticket to travel Europe. So we did that, and first stop was Paris, and I saw all these pieces on the riverbanks of the Seine, and I had never heard of Bando or Motu, but you know, I could see their work. So somehow I went back to where the pieces were, and I saw these guys. So I figured, you know, maybe they know it. Maybe no, they must be the guys who did it, or they even probably know them or something. So anyway, we got in touch, and from then on, you know, it appeared that that Bando, he was traveling to New York as well, so he had some knowledge about letter styles. He got some knowledge from Bear 167, I think. And you know, I said, you know, I was hanging out with Dondi, and then, you know, we kind of built the whole European graffiti scene from there.
right, and it wasn't just walls; it was trains. Every city had a train system.
Yes, but they were not painted, so you know, we had a big job cut out for us, you know, and especially in Munich, like this photo you're showing right now. I mean, we got together a couple of times. I went to Paris. Bando and his guys, Sign, and they went to Amsterdam, and then we started traveling to Germany, and Germany was still, you know, quite pristine, but of course, the, you know, Subway Art, the book, and Wild Style, the movies, Star Wars, they were coming out around that time, or maybe a little bit later. But so yeah, we kind of pioneered in a lot of different cities in Europe.
And so when you think about those years, right, of pioneering and pushing forward, what kind of aspirations were you having in terms of where you would go, how you would develop as an artist? Because the Americans were already showing in a kind of formal setting of galleries.
Yeah, well, you know, actually, my mindset was always more in the graphic design direction. And I don't know, being an artist, I always, yeah, there was a lot of struggling artists in Amsterdam, and being an artist wasn't really, you know, considered very cool or something. And for me, it was more, I wanted to do applied arts like graphics. And so I did that, and I started my own company. I trained as an assistant for Anton Beke, who was a very well-known Dutch designer, and kind of learned the whole graphic design trade there, and also tried to incorporate the whole graffiti attitude in it, which worked out, but it wasn't until many years after that that I considered myself actually really an artist. Because I don't know, being an artist, for me, it was always something that I wanted to do, but maybe at a later age, or maybe if I have a little bit more experience in life and knowledge.
Right, and you went on to start an advertising agency, the Unruly Advertising Agency with Dennis
Exactly.
Pollack,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
right?
you know, I mean, well, I had a company, a graphic design company, kind of took off. We did websites, one of the first web design jobs that were, you know, that was coming up, and yeah, we got pretty successful, and then a big advertising agency, BBDO, kind of. Saw what we were doing and they kind of bought us. So I did also 3 years as an art director in an advertising company. But after a while, you know, you know, the art, you know, people around me, also my friends, they were saying like, come on, you know, you got to get out of this art advertising marketing bullshit. You know, you're an artist. You got to express yourself.
Right,
And
and there was a moment. There was a moment that you mentioned earlier about that aha moment when you came to New York again,
yeah,
and
that's right. Yeah.
you saw Eric Hayes, and there you two chopped it up and started thinking about the type as painting as proper painting.
Well, you know, I mean, so I had done a lot of years in doing graphic design, and actually, Quick was always telling me about Eric Hayes. You got to meet him, because I met a lot of guys from New York, but I never met Eric. Well, I met him before, but and he had moved to LA, and I met him there a couple of times. He was doing his clothing brand, and he had just moved back to New York, I think in 2005 or something. And that's when I met him there, and we were both kind of fed up with the whole meetings and you know, the corporate side of our art form. And we said, okay, you know what, let's go get a whole bunch of materials and experiment. And we went in his basement and started doing, you know, stuff without anybody telling us, you know, without a briefing or whatever. So in my case, I somehow, I don't know, it wasn't like a choice, but it just happened because I had done calligraphy way even before I did the graphic design. I did calligraphy as well. So I started to mix the two, and this word calligraphy just came out of that, and I was like, yeah, that's something I could, you know, build on. And well, you know, I mean, it's a worldwide movement right now. So
And so, 1 second, Niels, you froze for a second. So now the idea of calligraffiti, again, you start thinking, let me apply graffiti aesthetics to it, or texture, or distress texture, because it doesn't have the traditional graffiti elements of connections and pumps and arrows and clouds. So how did you define it as calligraffiti? What was it? Was it by virtue that you were a graffiti artist? Hello? Can you hear me? Bear with me, folks. We'll bring them back on right now.
yeah,
Niels, can
here
you
we
hear
go.
me? Okay. So Niels,
Yeah, okay, we're back.
my question to you, I'll ask it again. Uh, you started doing this calligraffiti, but again,
Yeah.
some of it didn't have, or it didn't have the traditional elements of graffiti style writing, like pumps and arrows and clouds and these kinds of things. You brought distress texture to the calligraffiti, but were you naming it calligraffiti by virtue that you were a graffiti writer, or were you trying to invent a new
Yeah,
type of
because
typeface?
well, the thing is, if calligraphy, it's just it needed. I didn't just want to do calligraphy, and had the background of the graffiti background, and I wanted to, going back to Dr. Red, who I mentioned earlier, doing big and expressive and with splatters and and also maybe write other text than just home sweet home or something. And so it was that was basically what I was looking for, something but also I kept you there.
You did this ambitious show called Throw Ups, and we have an image of Throw Ups. You throwing paint. Yeah, you throwing paint at the canvas. Tell us about this exhibition, and thematically, what were you aiming at?
Well, yeah. Well, like I said, trying to take calligraphy into something more expressive and something more less writing but more painting, and just exploring the whole thing. I was like, okay, maybe we could also throw paint and I made paint bombs out of baubles, these Christmas decorations. So I filled them up, and also, which was kind of a funny thing, that I like baseball. I like to play baseball, so I kind of know how to throw a ball, and I filled them with paint, and so that's how. Then I realized, okay, it's a throw. You throw the paint. It's a throw up, which is a graffiti term, of course. And then yeah, so that show actually did made a big statement within the calligraphy.
So the next thing in this slide, we have two slides here. One, a shoe painting in a very nice looking either apartment
yeah,
or
I
office.
just it's kind of nice that you see where if it's the contrast between the rawness of a calligraphy painting, which is really much more like painting and less writing, and to see it in situ in a nice apartment, it's kind of, I always like that. It's that scene in Star Wars where where the high society are looking at graffiti paintings and they're talking, so that's what I like about that shot.
And yeah, I juxtaposed it next to a shot of you painting outdoors, right? And one of the things that was very interesting to me is how artists kind of negotiate that, right? The informality, the freedom of painting outside, of being in public space, and then of creating their works in the studio, and then that these works, only to be seen by a few, end up in these really nice collections. Is there any preference for you in terms of your artistic satisfaction?
No, well, to me, it's all about the translation. It's if you do if you do stuff on canvas or something that's going to be in a museum or a gallery or whatever, it's the stuff you do outside. And if you do exactly the same, for me, it looks out of place. But if if you take your knowledge and make it into something else, I think, yeah, like Dondi had no, even though it's totally different. I mean, it's a different environment, different setting, different size, but still, you know, he did it in a magnificent way. But everybody has to find their own way to translate the one to the other. And for me, it's fine to keep doing both, you know.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that in the large scale murals, like the ones we're looking at now, one is it says Istanbul, Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Was that in Istanbul or in
Yeah,
Amsterdam?
it was. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
and then
yeah, yeah.
you know, and then the big building on the white building on the side, on the right side, says everything is a thing. So now tell me about messaging, public messaging in the work. You know, whereas, you know, we'll get to some of these other works, but
Yeah.
you have a more expressive, abstract expressionist style that you're exploring that has nothing to do with words. But these works, particularly when they're facing the public, is this your communication and design skills coming back to support these kinds of murals?
Well, it's actually, you know, it's a very difficult puzzle that I made for myself, basically, because text-based art, which is conceptually conceptual art, you know, it's you have this kind of text-based art, and then you have abstract painting, and they